But with your team, you have all of those relationships, right? You have the doers and you have the critical thinkers and you have these people that just run through a wall and the skeptics. And that's the value of a strong leadership team. And if everybody's like you, you're probably not going to have a strong leadership team and you're not going to have the success that you want to have as a leader.
Welcome to Making Sparks, the podcast where we ignite your passion for metal fabrication and fuel your business success. Join industry leaders and dive deep into the world of metalworking. From business insights to tips of the trade, Making Sparks is your forge of knowledge. During each episode, discover success stories, innovative solutions, and expert interviews that light the path to business growth. Subscribe today and grow and improve your company, and let's make sparks fly together.
Get the 10 lasso.
Well, you just looked a little more professional than you do sometimes.
This is what I'm wearing, basically.
Full of kindness this morning.
I don't know.
We're honest with each other.
I'm rolling
Did he come in his pajama bottom?
He knows I love it.
Well, we only have 3 hours and 52 minutes on this memory card, so let's keep it under that. You want to talk into it. You see that little dial? You'll actually talk right toward the dial right here. I always tell people, when you're bored, Matthew will. He'll sit back here and talk, and then we have to fix his audio. Welcome back to Making Sparks. I'm your host, Casey Velker. We're sitting here live today in the maid's quarters at the Founder's House with my co-host, Matthew Nix, who you guys all know typically really hosts these shows. I just introduce them. And we have someone else here actually sitting here live. Matthew, introduce him.
Yeah, I've got my friend Brent Rasche here with us today. And known Brent for quite a long time. He's been a friend and business mentor of mine. And he's got a really stellar career, a lot to share with us. Recently went out on his own to start his own executive coaching and business planning business. So happy to have Brent here with us today. And I think some of the insights we're going to share with you guys today, based on our own experience with our company and Casey starting his new business, I think there's going to be a lot of great takeaways for our audience here today.
Thanks for having me on the show, guys. I'm looking forward to the conversation. It's hard as a coach. Sometimes you have to practice what you preach, right? So being a business owner and starting something up, a lot of lessons learned the hard way.
Awesome. Well, you guys give us a background of, I don't know how far back you want to go, but
Sure.
Go back or all the way to when you started.
Your professional background. I think it sets the stage for where
If you
you are
played
today.
sports ball in high school, you can talk about that too.
Well, I don't think we'll go back that far and bore anybody, but started out of college in engineering. Got into, like a lot of people, when you get out of college, it's kind of the first job that comes along and it's going to pay the bills. So started doing that and decided I did not like engineering. Did not like it at all. It was too boring, too monotonous. Started getting into production supervisor type roles, led to department manager roles, international experience, started running departments, businesses, global roles at one time, spent time in finance, sales, HR. And as my career developed, what I wanted to do in life became more and more clear. And so now this opportunity to be a business coach, kind of interact with my clients as kind of a servant leader, help them understand what worked for me and especially what didn't work for me, those lessons learned. And I'm now doing that on my own as a full time.
Awesome.
So you spent a lot of time in automotive manufacturing. Maybe tell us a little bit about what were some of the big takeaways you took from being in a big automotive world. Like what are some of the good things you took away from that, and what are some of the negatives?
A great question, Matthew. I think the biggest. So a lot of times people say, well, hey, automotive's hard, and there are aspects of it that are hard. But I think the best part of automotive is you have a business cadence, right? So you have new vehicles coming up. There's a new vehicle release. You know what your products are going to be on it. You quote it, you get the business, and you kind of know based on historical sales, hey, here's what I'm going to be dealing with. So it gives you an opportunity as a leader to be really focused on cost, right? How can I do this job? It's coming up. How do we make sure that when we launch and hit the ground running? So as a business standpoint, that cadence of here's what we're going to do, here's our business plan, here's how we're going to execute, here's what we're going to do every day on the floor, here's our huddle meetings, this is what this looks like, here's how we're going to measure success. Those metrics don't change a lot. Your business stays very focused. Now, the numbers might move, but the actual process stays the same. You can become very good, right, at executing. On the flip side, the hard part of automotive is you're not always in control of price. You're always giving money back every year. You're giving back incentives. And you just hope the product ends where you're still profitable and you can go into the next program.
Coming, I've interacted with you as we got to do some videos together. Remember that? That was a good.
Yeah, we did.
And actually, I didn't even realize
when
you were at the automotive manufacturer, we actually got footage when we went in and got B-roll for Nick's. You were interacting with Brent in some of that footage. You know that?
Back at oh yes,
yeah.
Back at the SRG days.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if we were allowed to say names. That's why. I don't know. Yeah. All I know is that there was a lot of yellow Nick's platforms. That's why
all those businesses have changed names now, so
it's all
good luck with that. Yeah.
So obviously, we want to talk about strategic planning, and I've got my taste for the last really 5 years since partnering with Nick's on strategic planning, and I got to see it before we partnered.
Mm-hmm.
When you I'm gonna use this. I'm gonna go back to my sports ball days. We had a T-shirt that everybody made fun of, but now it makes total sense. It said if you hitch your wagon to a star, you may not get there, but you will go far. And I was like, that's kind of funny. But what basically it's saying, if you make these big goals, yes, you want to reach them. But if you work towards those goals, sure, you may not get there, but you're going to go a lot farther than if you had no plan at all. So I guess my question to you is why should manufacturers get into strategic? We've talked about strategic planning before, but how can they wrap their head around it if they're just or how do they follow through on the strategic planning, things like that?
Yeah, before I want to add on to that question for you before you answer it. We're big proponents of strategic planning here, and it's been an evolutionary process, and we're going to get into something you talked about later about the planning being in the process being more of a muscle versus an event. Yeah, we'll get into that later. But my question is, I know of at least one business, and I'm sure there's many more out there, but that I highly respect. They've been tremendously successful. No one could argue that they're not successful. They do zero planning. Their CEO said, we don't plan. Mm-hmm. It's like a badge on for them. They're opportunistic. He said, we do what our customers want us to do. That's the plan. We just do what they want. That is a plan, though. They just do what they want. Yeah. So I guess that's a piggyback on his question. You're explaining maybe why it's important, how to go about it, but speak to that, for that would be the argument for some is that, well, I don't need to go through all that stuff.
I think that's rare, but yes, I do think there's those moments of success. But if we go back to the simplest business and we say you're a solopreneur, you're a startup, you know everything. You know what you're making, you know the products and services, you're having all those conversations, you're catching the energy of your clients. And so it's real easy to scale your business because you're making all the decisions. So the challenge comes when you start building a team around you and you start bringing people in. And now that vision's in your head and you've got these people, they also have all of these talents, these unique abilities, but you're not engaging them. And then when they're forced to make decisions, because that's what the business requires of their role, they don't have that alignment. And so therein lies the gap. And while
clarity.
It's clarity and collaboration. And so while we didn't name that company, for those companies that kind of run on autopilot, the culture is probably 100% consistent. They've nailed culture. There's clarity on the vision. We just want to do what our customers want. We want to grow. There's probably anything in between. Let's talk about it and let's move the ball down the field. So I would argue there is a vision there and there is a business plan and a strategy. It just looks different.
They don't have a big event.
Yes. It just looks different than what other business owners do traditionally because they're much further down a path than those other business owners are.
How big is that company you're talking about, Matthew? Because I see
over $1 billion.
Okay.
Sales.
All right. I was going to say, I could see on a small company, not they have a plan. I mean, for us, for example, we did our very first with our now new core team. I'm very proud of. We did our own little internal strategic planning after going through our Nick's one. I wanted to do, or we did an initial one for Nick's, and then I wanted to do one internally to see where it fits into that, which was really cool. And I rolled out finally 4 core values because I was like,
good for you.
Well, we've been hiring and I just want to make sure that if we're hiring at this small of a scale, we're hiring hopefully our all-star team, right? Yeah. I don't want to make too many mistakes on hiring, and I want to make sure that I know we're going to, but I want to make sure that we're hiring the people that are already going to align with the 3 of us that are full time, and then as we bring on interns and stuff like that they're there to help interns and all this stuff. So
if you really nail your core values, you can hire. Yeah, based on that criteria, and that should be
all kind of. It was really cool when we made it out, and I have 2 team members that probably think a lot different than I do. I'm very much I have when I tripped down the stairs, I said, I'm glad I got down those stairs really fast kind of guy. And they were like, yeah, these actually sound like what we would want in a team member.
The reality, you're describing your behaviors, right?
Yep.
When you're saying, hey, well, this is how we behave at Captivated Content. This is our core values. And it really is those behaviors. There's a disconnect there for a lot of companies, or even worse, the core values aren't applied consistently throughout the organization or don't apply to everybody.
Or their aspirations.
I was going to say too aspirational. I worked for the company this year that they had 8 core values, which a good amount, right? And I would say 7 of them, when I've met every their employees, they all fit it. And there was one that was aspirational. What it was, celebrate the wins. And I was like, I'm cool with that being core values. If that's what you guys are wanting to aspire to do, like, and they all said, we could all work on that. They all thought it was important, but they all knew they weren't doing it.
I want to circle back to that point of like that person that stood out. That's so real. When you work with companies and you're trying to look at the overall core values and the culture, and then there's that one person, they don't fit. What signals does that send to your clients? What signals does that send to other employees, right? And how does it break down your company? It just takes one, right?
Hey guys, it's Nick from Making Chips, and I gotta tell you about our new show, Lights Out. When someone talks about being lights out, what comes to mind? For me, it's Michael Jordan, he's got the ball, the game's on the line, or it's Leo Messi taking that ball up to take a penalty in a penalty shootout. These guys are elite, and they're unstoppable, and you just know they're not gonna miss. But I also think about the technology, automation, process, and most importantly, the mindset of the manufacturing leaders with the best shops in the world. Every episode will equip and inspire you to run lights out so you can sleep soundly while your shop never stops. Because we all know, if you're not making chips, you're not making money. So check out the new Lights Out podcast by Making Chips. I will see you there.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So you mentioned something earlier when we were talking about planning. You said it needs to be a muscle that you exercise, not an event.
Sure.
And I think in the early days, when we started planning, there was a very small core group of us, which has now become our executive team today. But we really, the 6 of us, we could pull the levers and do the things and make the things happen. So we would go off site for a day or two. We would come up with our plan, and then we would go execute it. And then we would meet monthly or quarterly, and literally it was all on one piece of paper. And we would take a red ink pen, put a check mark by stuff,
Right.
or we would write down, I've saved this. It's a really kind of a cool and a source of pride of an archive for us. But we wrote down, like, we're going to delay this one quarter.
Right.
And I mean, it was like the best strategic planning we ever did. And then how do you take that idea? The 6 of us got around the table with one piece of paper, marked it up with red ink, and it truly moved the business forward. And by the way, we didn't accomplish everything on that list. And it's really fun to look back on how much of it we did accomplish. And some of it was so silly. We thought that was important. It wasn't really important, but it was so
Changed a quarter later.
so transparent. And we just, it was clarity, and we moved the business forward. Fast forward today, still largely, I think, one of the 6 wasn't around back then, but the same 6 folks for the most part. But the 6 of us now have multiple leaders within our sphere of influence that we're trying to cascade that to. And I would say that we have evolved into where this planning has become an event. And I think in the last couple of years we're doing better, but we've really struggled with, it's like, oh my God, it's time to plan again. Didn't we? And I hear people say, didn't we just do that? And that's a signal to me, like, all right, I'm not doing this
There's
right.
your sign. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, like, one of the big shifts we've made is we used to have people map out their priorities for the whole year. Some people call them rocks,
Sure.
Initiatives, depending on the systems you use. But it's essentially, what are my priorities? The big things that when I'm going to work on the business as opposed to in the business.
Yep.
What am I going to work on this year to move it forward? We're now doing that quarterly instead of annually, because we know they do evolve, but we need to stay focused, something not be a ping pong ball. So maybe just speak to that, the experience you've seen with companies that sort of devolve into this, like, planning is this thing we do,
Right.
as opposed to like an ongoing part of our business.
So there's probably 5 discussions in there, Matthew, but I'll start with the first one. Yes, I think a lot of people get business planning not enamored, but they get enamored with the actual event itself because it's fun. It's exciting. You're going off site. You're with people that you love.
Come up with big ideas.
Yeah, it's just great, right? You get all that excitement. Well, then what happens when you leave the room? Reality sets in, right? And so you talked about the quarterly styles that maybe a 40X or an EOS are scaling up, those different frameworks used. The idea, we want to make sure that as we're working with our teams, what's urgent doesn't push what's important off the plate. Because it is all to some extent, right? It's all critical. I got to do it. But if I understand what's important and I have those quarterly resets, it makes dealing with the urgent very important. But there's a saying that I'm not sure where it came from, but I really like it. And you probably heard, like you touched on it, but working with and through others to achieve organizational goals. You heard that saying? Mm-hmm. So when you're small, you're working with each other to achieve organizational goals. And what you just described, like when we get a room, there were 6 of us, we work with each other, we're moving fast. That's great. Now, as you start building your teams and you're having to work through others, it's a much different mindset, right? We're no longer doing the work, we're managing the work. And we got to be able to take that. And that's where that nuance comes into business planning, is that it's really about a muscle and it's about that rhythm and what's our meeting cadence, what are our scorecards. That's the power of the business plan to actually make it happen. The plan itself is just like looking at a picture. We took a snapshot, we got in a room, we all smiled, we put our best clothes on. Boom, here's what we're going to look like 2 years from now, 3 years from now. Now it's where we got to actually figure out how we're going to do it. And that's where those systems really bring that clarity, quarter by quarter, just what are we going to focus on? How do we make sure we're managing it? And that's how it works.
You mentioned about being transparent, and then you said something about like what happens when you have to start working through the team.
Yeah.
Is it okay to be transparent with your strategic plan? You know, like
I think you have to.
Like that's what I agree. I found like even in life, right? Like if you're a little bit more transparent about things, like if you think of your parents, right? I'm gonna say my parents were very transparent about finances, like about certain things and about where we were struggling when we were kids. And not really kids, but maybe in like high school or so. And that taught me something when I became an adult. I met people that their parents weren't. They kind of hid it from. And guess what would happen when they became big kids?
Nothing good.
Nothing. Yeah. They struggle. Maybe they're still good people. They're good people. Okay. Yeah. And good things probably have happened, but they're probably struggling with their finances a little bit. Yeah. But I guess that's the same thing with like a business. Like I have learned, like, again, at a smaller company, and I know you guys, when you guys were probably smaller, but now with you guys being a little larger, you guys are pretty transparent with the team on what, you know, I mean, you guys do financial updates. You guys do, obviously, like, why the core values are
planning updates. Yeah. Like, here's what we said we were going to do. And here's what we actually did. Right? And here's where we fell short. Yeah, and I do a red, yellow, green scorecard on that. I try to keep it super simple. I always, at the highest level of the organization, meaning every team member in the whole company, we try to keep it to like 4 or 5 or 6 things for the year. You know, just don't get in the weeds. But here's 5 things this year that we need to try to accomplish as an organization. And then at the end of the year, I'll do a red, yellow, green on how we did on that. Keep it super simple. And as you go deeper, you know, into leadership, you know, it gets more granular, of course. But yeah, I think it's absolutely essential to do that.
And I've sat through your meetings. I think the key you said there, Matthew, is how do I keep it simple? How do I keep it so that when somebody takes this room, because transparency's really good as long as it's understood. Sometimes when you share too much, it gets complicated and people get lost in the weeds, and it's noise. And I think you do a really good job of that, of like, hey, I just want to be transparent on these 3 priorities. We're not even going to talk about the other 3 or 4. On these priorities, here's where I want to focus today. That's part of being transparent, right? Is that consistency. You're sending that message. This is important. There's other things, they're urgent, but this is what's important. This is where we focus.
Yeah. And I think you know, you've talked about this too, Matthew, before, but also like tying the individual team members to those plans. Like where does their role fit into that? Because like, especially in manufacturing, you got tons of different roles, or people might, I'm going to go with, you know, in like the plastics industry, like someone who might be working on the extrusion line, and, you know, their goal, obviously it's really important to keep that extrusion line going and keep it up, but they're like, they may not realize like how important their role is to, I watch them when they pull the the plastic over the roller and stuff. Like they may not realize unless someone says like, if you don't do this, we don't do this, you know.
The key aspect of what you said though is it's all connected. So just like that extruder, somebody put plastic in the machine. Now the plastic's coming out. We've got a finished product. We're doing whatever we're doing to it. Then somebody's delivering it to a client. In our businesses, it's the same way. So I could be in payables. I could be in sales. How am I connected to the overall business in a way that creates value? And if that clarity doesn't exist, in their minds, they're working hard, but they're not working on things that create value.
I heard something related to that. This is probably divergent from planning, but this is so good. We were at a seminar a few weeks ago, and Jasper Engines, give them a shout out, their president's on our board, but they were leading a breakout session about team member development and internal training programs. They do something that's so freaking cool, and we're going to adopt here is in their like level 1 leadership training program. They actually have the team members map out the entire flowchart process from the time that the salesperson goes out to the order comes in the door until it gets shipped and invoiced on the semi truck. And frontline team value stream mapping, but these frontline teamers, and you know, most of them wouldn't even know what to call it, but you know, you could do it with Post-it notes on the wall. You could have a little simulated thing on the computer where you could do it on all kind of cool ways, but magnets on a whiteboard. But I thought, what an incredible idea, because it teaches you, they have to, it's an exercise. Okay. You just go up, put all the pieces of the puzzle together. Yeah. But imagine how it communicates the internal customer, stakeholders up and down the street. I'm sure we're all connected. And anyways, we diverged from planning a little bit, but that was piggyback off what you're saying.
I think it was such a marry up to planning though. If you don't understand that aspect of your business, if you don't understand all those connections, your plan's not going to be your ability to execute your plan is not going to be as effective as it could be as a business that truly understands all those connections and what this goal means throughout the entire supply chain of the business.
Yeah, absolutely.
You got anything?
Go ahead. No, I was looking at my notes.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it because it's so funny. You guys actually talk about like I'm reading our little cheat sheet here that shout out Chloe put together for us. And it's like cascading ownership, empowering every team member to own a piece of the plan. And really what you guys are just talking about, that helps them understand they're part of the plan, they're a piece of the plan. But I do like this kind of question is like when you have to adjust the plan, like you guys kind of talk about it easily, like, doing it now quarterly. Yeah. Is there any, have you experienced like that you're failing because if you have to adjust it? Like I will say this, a good example is when we hired down here last year. Yeah. We adjusted our 10-year strategic plan.
Adjusted expectations.
And so we were like, holy crap. And I just looked at it again this year. I thought we're having a great year. And I look at what we're supposed to do next year. I'm like, oh crap, we're still not where we predicted us to be next year. So everything basically has taken, we basically had like a 2-year backtrack of like where we were going because of just things that happened, right?
And it recreate a little bit.
Yeah, and that was probably the first time I felt a little bit failure. Like I don't really, I just look at things. I'm like, I'll roll with it.
Shake it off and
I shake it off. Sure. But I did feel like I'm like, oh crap, like we aren't where we thought we were. We're having a good year, but we're not where we thought we were going to be. So how do you fight that like failure mindset, I guess?
Well, you have. The first question you asked was about should you or can you adjust? You have to adjust, with reality. I mean, like. We went through the same thing. We had these big aspirational 3-year plan, and then we had some things happen. And it's like, it's not that we're not going to do that. And it would be reckless of us to have a CapEx plan and have a bonus plan and have all these things in alignment with this, that's no longer realistic. So we have to adjust to be more realistic. But that doesn't mean, to your point, that you ignore what we said we were going to do. That still lives over here. Here's what we said we were going to try to do. Now we got to adjust annually or quarterly or whatever to be more realistic. And then back to what you said early on was that you'll end up being further along someday than you would have been. So why don't you talk about how do you balance the difference between being like a ping pong ball and because you can't just change your mind all the time, but you can also be too rigid. So why don't you speak to that?
I think it goes back to what we talked about earlier, transparency, and you bring up a good point. I like the ship analogy of, the ship's out of the water. You've charted the course. I got a plan. I'm moving along. And there's a big storm ahead. We got to decide as leaders. Do we push through the storm? Maybe the markets have changed. Maybe there's tariffs. There's all these things, right? How are we going to be better than our competitors, even in a down economy? So you can push through. At the same time, if the ship develops a hole, you could keep pushing ahead, or you might have to stop and patch the hole, right? So I think for business leaders, being agile like that and understanding that's the reality that we took a snapshot in time. Things have changed. How can we be agile now? But what you want to avoid in leaders, I think this is where they get kind of critical. You're not necessarily giving up on your plan. Your plan to hit your vision's still the same, but things have happened. And so messaging it so it's not a flavor of the day to where you're like, hey, I'm a ping pong. No, here's what we've learned. I'm going to be transparent. We've got these issues going on. We quoted these jobs and tariffs are impacting us. So we're going to pivot over here to get through the storm. But our vision, where we want to go, where we're trying to take this ship, that's unchanged. We're still focused. And if you can message that clearly to your team, it's not going to be a flavor of the day. It's not going to be a ping pong. They're going to rally. It's going to be a burning platform. They're going to rally behind it and say, hey, we got these ideas. Here's how we can get through the storm. That's when you know you've got the right culture and the right people.
Hey guys, it's Nick from Making Chips. I want to give you 3 quick reasons why you should check out Mike Payne's podcast, By the Numbers. Mike, my good buddy, my partner on Making Chips, is full of wisdom. He's full of experience. He's full of what it takes to buy, sell, and lead a business, specifically a manufacturing business. So all the numbers that you should be focused on to improve your performance, that's what he's the master at. The second reason, Mike's the first person I call. If I'm looking at a new idea, a new partnership opportunity, a new acquisition, any new initiative where I need to dive into the numbers and figure out how to approach it, Mike is who I go to. And third, you got to love that buttery Tulsa King voice that Mike rocks. It just soothes your soul. It gives you the confidence to elevate your leadership. Jokes aside, if you love making chips, or if you're just passionate about improving your business performance and the financial performance of your company, check out By the Numbers by Making Chips, hosted by my good buddy, Mike Payne.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. But don't you think there is some relevance to a cadence or a time frame with which you would make those adjustments? Sure. You can't just be the CEO woke up today and said, we're going to change that. Like there should be, for a business of any scale, obviously, that has a lot other leaders that are influencing decision. I guess question one is, don't you think there should be some standardized cadence to that? Now, look, if the world goes on lockdown from a pandemic or something, you adjust accordingly. But I'm saying
that would never happen.
Normal course of business.
Hopefully never again.
Like, normal course of business, we are going to, here's when we would make major adjustments. So question number one, do you agree there should be some kind of cadence? And question number two is, if that's yes, then like, what do you think ideal looks like around that?
So yes, so I go back to our scorecards and our critical few. So if we know what those critical few are we're working on, some businesses say, hey, if I have 3 periods, 3 scorecards on my, what I call my critical few, my big targets, if they're not on track, it's time to take a step back and try to understand what's going on.
Not on track for some period of time.
Yeah, for like, if it's 3, pick your number. Some people say 3. I find in businesses, just pick a number. And if that's not fast enough, then we go back, we move, adjust on, but start somewhere and then start questioning things. So if you're a leader and you look at your scorecard and you see 3 periods where something is not trending in the right direction, it's time to ask the tough questions. And maybe there's a really good reason you have to pivot, focus on other products and services. Maybe that's the challenge. Or maybe our goals or our targets, maybe our clients don't value what we're bringing. But you got to ask those questions. And your scorecards, in some way, shape, or form, should be your triggers to start asking those questions.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. So, for example, we'll pick a number and say on a rolling 4-week, we're looking at the scorecard every week. So, on a rolling 4-week basis, if we're red 4 weeks in a row, that would be our trigger to say, do we need to reevaluate the plan?
The closer to the operations, yes. Now, if you said, hey, 4 weeks, our sales are down in this month, and you knew projects were pushed out or this happened, maybe I wouldn't react to that. But the closer you are to operations, maybe you're talking about productivity or safety or overtime. Hey, we've seen this trend now. Do we have a staffing challenge? What's going on in the business? Yeah, weekly, especially at the business level or operations level, yes. That type of trend would be.
But if it's a larger corporate level initiative, longer term, it might be, hey, we've had 2 or 3 quarters in a row that aren't trending right. Now it's time to think about adjusting. Is that it gets to be a higher level initiative?
And it could just simply be speeding up. I think some companies struggle with, hey, we're not getting the results we want. They're not happening fast enough. Okay, well, what we're doing is not working. maybe not so. Maybe what you're working on is working. It's just not fast enough. So
Gave them put enough resources.
is it a resource allocation? What, how can we speed this up? It's working. I have clients' price increases right now are the biggest struggle. What's that right balance? And if you lose sight of where you want to be as a business, you lose sight. We'll push that off till next month, or we'll push it. So having those targets, looking at your profitability, it's going to send you those messages that on tough decisions that you may have to make organizationally.
When you're doing strategic planning, how important is it to reflect on where you've been? So like one of the reasons we did our little strategic plan after we did ours with Nick's this year was, first, I just wanted to tell them, like, good job, guys. Like, look at this. Like, it was really cool. I look at it. I'm kind of competitive, so I'm always like I tell Chloe, who does a lot of our sales, I say just beat the quarter, like do that, or beat the month.
You've got a rock star there, so you can do that.
Exactly. I beat it, but now we have to dial it back because of backlog and stuff like that. But I looked back when I launched captivated content. And the simplest thing is like, our total yearly revenue is definitely higher, obviously, but it's not as high as I wanted it to be. But then I looked at monthly, and we just had like a record month, right? And I looked at like the first year in business, and our month is 5 times as much revenue as it was that first year. And I thought we launched pretty good in that first year. I was like, I remember landing our first big client, and
looking forward.
And I was like, man, but we launched we I had a lot of help by partnering with Nick's to get my business going that first year, but like the money was pretty decent that year, at least what I thought. But then I looked at the monthly revenue, I was like, whoa, like that's really cool. And so that was the first thing we did before I started telling them what we're going to be doing in 2026. I actually call it 2026 and beyond because they'd never been a part of like a strategic planning. And I just basically said, you guys don't know this because you guys have only been here, amazing with me 3 years. Chloe's been here 7-8 months. And so I'm like, it's really cool to see. Like, you guys don't get to see it, but I get to see it. And even
I think you're onto something. Well, you brought them into the story, and you let them be a part of the journey. They weren't here early then, but now they can internalize that and say, wow, I'm a part of, look where Casey started and where we are today. It's so many business owners don't just do that simple little thing. My brother closed out our monthly leadership meeting this past month. And one of the things we talked about at our executive offsite this year, we're trying to kind of cascade the culture and the values down through the rest of the leadership. And so we said, how are we going to do that? It can't just be Matthew doing that. And so one of our leaders, our VP of Business Development, or a VP of Administration, Adam Schmidt, he said, we all need to share stories. Storytelling is great. Storytelling. And he's like, we all need to share our stories. Yeah. And I said, absolutely. So we are going to rotate. And at the end of every monthly management meeting, somebody's going to share a story. So Adam closed the meeting out, and he said, similar to what you just said, he wanted to share with everybody the first year that Matthew was in business. Here's the total revenue that he did. And he said, guys, we are now doing that every 2 days.
Yeah.
Every 2 days. And now they all got to participate in that. Like, you weren't here back then, but you're here now, or you've been here 10 years or 7 years. You're sharing in that. And so to your question about looking backwards, you absolutely should. I think at least once a year, reflect on, even when it's not so rosy, like, hey, here's where we fell short. Here's where we stubbed our toe. But
it's a timeless human experience, right? We've been storytelling, sitting around campfire, doing what we're doing right now, right? How do we share these stories? Iron sharpens iron. But if you're not talking to your team and they're not sharing in that, they don't know what worked and what didn't work, right? So they're potentially going to repeat some of the mistakes that you learned along the way. And you started earlier with, why do some companies set those big, hairy, audacious goals, right? Why are they? For that reason of, you don't want to limit yourself. So if you looked at your first year and you're like, oh, this was great. And now you look back, you're like, wow, I could have done this. Now look what I'm doing now. Or to you earlier, I'm doing what I did in a year and 2 days. We limit ourselves. And I think that is part of the human experience too. But if you hitch your wagon to the stars, who knows where you're going to go. If you set those big goals, your brain is funny how it's going to work and take you to that, even when you're not really thinking about it. And having that humility and that gratitude to reflect is great. You share that experience, but having that positivity, that momentum is key for a business. So just keep pushing forward. It's a great story.
Let's talk about simplification. That was one of the notes we had to talk about simplifying goals. You talk about the critical few.
Yep.
That's something we've tried to do a better job of here. And sometimes just framing things or using common terminology can be valuable. So we're going to adopt that. You've helped us with that. Thank you for that. This idea of the critical few, because let's be honest, there are more than 3 things. There just is. I don't give a crap. I don't give a crap. Everybody's like, you can only have 3. Okay, fine.
There's one thing.
There's one thing. Bullshit. Yeah. That's not true. That's not reality. But framing it as like the critical few, right? Like, because in the background, for example, I might have a couple priorities that I know are really big and important and are going to move the business forward. They're not urgent. They're not earth-shattering right now. They might even be things that I enjoy doing. Mm-hmm. I can bounce back to those every now and then. But I can also admit they're not in the critical few. Right. Like, maybe that's something I work on a Saturday morning, or maybe it's something I work on when I'm on the beach on vacation, right? And I get my notebook out. Like, I think it's okay to have other big long-term things you're working on, but framing it as the critical few. I love that. So tell us, how do you work with clients to help them boil down their life? What do we really got to work on here? And we all get alignment around it.
So I think I mentioned I was talking to a client in the parking lot before I came in here today, and we were going through. So framing it up can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different leaders. But I think what Matthew just said, you carry a big stick. When people have an opportunity to talk with you as a leader, everything you talk about matters. Whether you realize it or not, it matters. And so framing up your conversation to say, hey, I'm just thinking strategically now. This isn't like, I don't want you to run off, Casey, and go do this. Yeah. But framing it up to say, I just want to talk through some ideas with you to help me make a better
decision. I used to struggle with that a lot. I would talk about ideas with my team, and now they thought
they would go out and do it.
Well, no one will say that. I mean, maybe sometimes, but
as someone who used to do some of the marketing work for him directly, he would do it the other way too, where I thought he was just strategizing, and then he'd be like, hey, where are you at with that? I'm like,
people are out there breaking dirt because Matthew said, I wonder if we put a building over here, and he comes, wait, where'd that building come from?
No, that doesn't happen. But people do think, well, shit, now it's another priority. Right? It's like, no, we were just ideating on that.
So, take the conversation I had today. We know all these things are on the list. They don't go away. But I always, like, if I've got dates and scorecards, that helps me with what's important, right? I know where I want to go. So dates and scorecards. So is there a project and when's it due? So this particular person, they've got a lot of analytics they're doing. They owe this report. It's going to drive a lot of things in their sales organization. It's due the 21st. So what are the things that are urgent that are getting in the way? But how do you make sure that we stay consistent on, is this still important? Yep, that's still important. That's got to be done. Okay, well, now we have to tell the business these things that you believe are urgent, they're not urgent. Or they're going down a list, or we're just not going to prioritize them right now. They're important. I mean, it's nuance of important versus urgent. But right now, what's most important for this organization is I get this reporting done so the team can make better decisions. And I committed to, I'm doing it by this date. So for me as a coach, I'm always listening. Is it a scorecard or is it an action? Like, did I have a date on it? Did I commit to that? Did I make a commitment to my team? That's driving those priorities. It doesn't mean the other, I use the parking lot term a lot. Just put it in the parking lot. Take a breath. I get it. It's another thing, but you're never going to win if you're working on everything.
Right? You helped me with that recently. I was, there's a longer term cultural thing that I want to work through for our organization. And you validated, yes, Matthew, that is important. I do think you're going to need to work on that. But if we don't fix this first, it's not going to matter. And it's not going to allow you the time and the space you need to do that. Right. And that was so important for me to just give myself the permission, because I was emotionally hung up on that. I need to do that. And it's like, yes, it is important. Right? We got to put it over in the parking lot. We need to address this first.
It goes back to how we're wiring as kids, right? We get a task list or a chore list from our parents, and we would just go right down the list. There wasn't a whole lot of thought about what's important. Same way with school and education. It's just how we're wired. And as we get to become adults and leaders, now we understand those lists were never ending. It'd be like if somebody put a whole book of thousands of things in front of us. That's what the reality of what we're confronted with every day. It's kind of easy to get rid of 900. It's really hard to get rid of the 100. And that's where really good leaders start to get clarity with their teams. Just constantly that rhythm, that drum. What are those critical few? How are we focused? What are those critical few?
I feel like my ADHD will not like that as much.
Probably not. No,
Yeah.
probably not.
I'm really bad. I'm doing something, but I'm like, hey, if I can do this while that's doing that, I need to stop doing this to get that started so that it does its thing. Anyway.
And then it dies.
Yeah.
A painful death. Or you got to come back and rehash it and restart it 10 times.
Yep.
So I think a good build off the critical few is building a discipline, a leadership. What was it? Building a leadership identity rooted in consistency. That was one of our bullet points as well. Can you speak to that?
So we touched on it right all day today. That leader that constantly changes their mind or constantly has doubt, that ripples. Everybody's always watching, right? Everybody's connected. What you're feeling, the organization feels as a leader. That's just the reality of it. So for that leader that's inconsistent, constantly doubting themselves, is it realistic for them to believe that the organization's not going to have those same feelings? I guess that's a question I get a lot. Yeah. Right. So as leaders, we got to get our heads into the right space, and we've got to walk out of those. There's times where we're going to get questioned. Maybe we're sitting with the board and they're challenging things. But when we leave those meetings, we take the feedback and we got to persevere. We got to move on, and we can't get caught in that self-doubt, because that then breeds doubt into our teams. So that's what I call that kind of that relentless, consistent execution. As leaders, we take it, we make a decision, we move forward. We take it, we make a decision, we move forward.
I think the consistency can come from two. Well, you mentioned one, that's the self-doubt, which I struggle with at times too. Self-doubt, organization doubt, whatever. Both of those.
Those saboteurs.
Saboteurs. Yeah. The other end of the spectrum, I think, is the shiny ball syndrome, where you get excited. And I struggle with that one too. So I think that's relevant for the audience, because as a leader, and the more senior leader you are, the more important that is, because you do have more influence. And maybe some tips about, if you suffer from one or both of those, how do you circumvent that? Because you do need, especially if you're a visionary, you do need to be thinking about new ideas. I mean, and my team will say that. They're like, we're so thankful that Matthew does that. He's at his best and the company's at its best when he is forward thinking creatively, what have you. But I can't spout out every idea I have to everybody, or it's a train wreck. So issues of the train.
What's so onto that? Like a question you were saying, like shining out. Like my big one is always who we are, because we're only 5 years old. And I always say, who are we? And I know Chloe and Mason get annoyed, because I'm always like, who are we going to be? Like, and I'll do that on a daily basis.
I think that's a very common thing. You just know how to articulate it because you have a marketing mind. But I would argue that there are so many people in the metal fabrication space. I don't care if they're plumbers, electricians, whatever. They struggle with the exact same identity problem as who are we as an organization? Meaning, what are we going to do? What are we not going to do? Who are we going to serve? Who are we not going to serve? You just know how to articulate it. So,
yeah, but I still think I confuse the heck out of them.
I know. I'm always struggling with that, but it's a common.
But just say it with a smile so they feel better.
Yeah,
but it is common.
Give me whatever we want, guys.
It's a common problem. Yeah, I mean, they still saying more companies die from indigestion than starvation. So
yeah. So let's break down what you said a little bit there. So depending on which book you read, we use that concept of saboteurs. It's probably one of my favorite discussion topics. And so like shiny ball is not something that I've ever struggled with. I tend to be more cynical, or there's other saboteurs and voices in my head that I'm always wondering on, hey, is this right or is this wrong? So understanding those saboteurs that are in our brains, which ones are stronger at influencing us. And then when you feel it, when you see the shiny ball, in Matthew's case, just recognize it. Say, I'm having a shiny ball moment. And that, I don't want to say it kind of gives you permission to get out of that space, but it gives you permission to get back into your leadership mindset and just call the saboteur, the victim mindset. There's all, again, depending on the book you read, everybody labels them a little bit different, but we all have those saboteurs. Every leader has them. And we could argue if you don't have them, maybe you're not human, or, you're not connected. And the empathy, there's a lot of other discussions there. But understanding your saboteurs and working with them, naming them, understanding them is key to that, to stopping those just when you're in the moment.
Do you write them down? Like there's one guy that I listened to on podcasts. He said they had an open office, and every idea hey, what if we start doing this, guys? So he basically, one of his strategic coach said, you got to stop doing that because first of all, it's just not productive. Yeah. And so when he has a notebook on the side of his bed. And he goes, he may go back and just look at it for fun, but all he does, he said, how much relief he gets from writing it down.
And there's the digital equivalent of that too. So that's what I do. And then when I do want to, because I think and ideate when I talk. And so I've learned that. And so it's like, well, that's just how I am. So I need to do that. Yeah. So when I go to do that with people, what I try to do, I'm not always doing it, but I'm doing better than I was. I try to name it, like you said. So Jared, our CFO, soon as be COO, who's wired completely different than me.
It's a fair assessment.
His head will explode when I come to him with that. But just me framing it differently, saying, Jared, this is not anything we're going to do anytime soon. This is just a harebrained idea I have. I just want to talk it. I want to talk through it out loud with somebody. And I gave him permission to just, he knows I don't need anything from him. I don't need him to implement it next week, or maybe not even next year, maybe never.
But he's still thinking about it. Literally, you're thinking, if I had to
you know
do
what?
this.
First of all, he appreciates that. Yeah. And then secondly, the caliber of feedback he gives me is so much better. Yeah. Because I gave him permission to just be like, I just want to talk through this out loud with somebody. So that's been huge. So a little bit of advice for people that do want to, like you said, just kind of ideate ideas, but just frame it that way with somebody. Like, hey, this isn't anything we're going to implement right now.
Where this is a tangent, but this is why it's so important to build a unique team around us to bring that balance. And Matthew's been focused on that for years. But how do you, because if Matthew was in a room with Matthews and they were all ideating and their hands were flying,
well, we wouldn't get anything done.
You would hurt each other. Let's just be honest. There would be a fist fight before the night was over. But with your team, you have all of those relationships, right? You have the doers and you have the critical thinkers and you have these people that just run through a wall, and the skeptics. And that's the value of a strong leadership team. And if everybody's like you, you're probably not going to have a strong leadership team, and you're not going to have the success that you want to have as a leader.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, just end right there. That was good.
Yeah, that was a great. I want to check our notes here.
We touched on agility. I remember that being one of them. People not wanting to pivot from a plan. That's a major one I hit into. The idea of like sticking to something, discipline. You know, if you want to touch like on calendars, and we all have different ways of doing it, but discipline is key. You know, basically build your life around your business and then balance it, right? So,
yeah, we had that in the notes. Discipline versus motivation. And I'm really big on this too. I mean, motivation is kind of like a flash in the pan kind of thing. Why don't you speak about that a little bit? Like, how do you?
Did we talk about like the compound effect? I can't remember.
No.
Okay, it's a different conversation. Okay.
Yeah. I've been into this topic. Yeah.
So it's a great question. Some leaders come in with this like blitz sprint mindset. Like, I'm going to bring this energy in and we're going to do all of. Well, the team, it's like running a marathon. Like, there's a little bit of practice has to go in before you set out there and start to run a marathon. And so what I see in the most successful leaders is this idea of like the compounding effect. Then there's the book, but how do I create those incremental improvements with my team every day, to where every day we're getting a little better, to where next thing you know, we are running a marathon and we're not even aware of it. Versus the leader that just says, hey, everybody get your clothes on, get your shoes. We're going to go run a marathon tomorrow. And you get halfway into it and everybody collapses. So there's lots of visuals on that, but that idea of like incremental improvement, having the discipline, even if you don't feel like working out today, you still show up. You still do your best. Maybe you didn't get using the trick.
What are some real examples of discipline though? Like what does that look like in a business?
Yeah, because I'm the opposite. Like, I always talk about the motivation, and that's like, I know my downfall. I'm very self-aware that I don't have as much discipline as I do when I get inspired and I'm motivated.
Sure.
Like, I always, it's bad, but I would be like, I'm just not motivated to do that or whatever. And so like this past year for me, I've been working on more discipline things with the help of my wife, with the help of my team and things like that. But I'm learning that like,
because a business sort of lowers to whatever
that common
denominator, whatever you tolerate, as opposed to consistently rising to those peaks.
Yeah.
So maybe it's easier to talk about what I see in clients when I walk through the door that's broken. So a leader that has town halls scheduled but never does them, pushes them off. They're on the calendar, and you guys have came, so you're not in this place, so you have to kind of put on your way back hats.
We were in that place just this year.
Yeah.
Cafe Convalescent.
But you're canceling key meetings. Performance reviews are behind. You're not doing the performance reviews. When I ask the team, like, hey, so tell me about your priorities and what your goals are, they tell me something completely different than what I just heard from the CEO or the president, leader of the company. So that discipline to me is the opposite of that. It's coming in where the leader's consistent, the message is consistent, the meetings, like, hey, how often do you have this meeting? Well, unless there's some major disaster, we always have them.
Yeah.
Okay. That's discipline.
That's
showing up every day to run the business.
Those are good examples. That's really helpful. Yeah. We have a senior leadership meeting you're aware of that happens every Monday at 1:30. It doesn't matter who's on vacation or what. It happens every Monday at 1:30, no matter what.
I use the analogy like if you didn't ship for 3 days, do you think your customers will be upset with you? Right. So if you're skipping meetings, what do you think the implications are on your business? You said it's key. It's a key element of
if it's not an important meeting, then we need
to
have a conversation about should we be having this meeting?
Exactly.
Or are the right people in the meeting?
All those other questions. Yeah. But those are things I look for undisciplined versus disciplined.
We see that the performance evaluation is not happening. It blows my mind the amount of people that join our organization. And one of the things they note about being disgruntled about the past was I never got an evaluation.
I never did until I work on things. I never drive out it.
So you have to, but it's easy for that to. You can see why
I interview a couple times, but
you can see why that happens. Like how easy it is for that to happen. So you have to systematize it. So here's what we do. It's very simple. Our HR manager has a running spreadsheet. It's not rocket science.
Nope.
It says here's the team member. Here's when it's due. Here's the manager who's responsible for doing it. And she starts doing it 30 days out in advance ahead of that. And then it turns yellow, then it turns red. She sends it out every single week religiously. And your name's on the list. And everyone's on it. So there's group accountability. Like it's not rocket science. And guess what? We're still late sometimes. But we're way better than if we didn't have the discipline around it.
I don't know if it's a pro tip, but I've got one of my clients that the conversation, I wasn't there for this part of the conversation, but they were talking about, well, we just won't do increases for the employees, right? If they don't get their reviews done, not doing it, well, we'll just hold off an increase. That way the employee will come to us and complain. And the leader of the company was like, no, absolutely not. The managers won't get their increases if their employees aren't getting their performance reviews. It changed overnight. When those managers and supervisors knew that they weren't going to get a performance review or an increase until their employees were done, things changed, right? So I think that sent a really good message on culture throughout that business that we're not going to punish the employee because the manager's not doing his job. We're going to hold the manager to account for doing what's expected of him.
How do you, so you're talking about like the meetings, like, Nick's has gotten us doing, our internal team does like we do a weekly meeting, and I added into our production meeting because we have, we do video productions we need to have, and we're all part of that. Like there's 3 of us, right? 3 full-time team members. We have a schedule where our part-time intern's with us so that she's part of it. It's on Tuesday. The problem is that 2 to 3 of us are also what we sell. So as in like,
right.
If I'm not out filming or I'm not out, or if I'm not editing, it's one thing, but if I'm not doing a billable, mostly out in the field billable, if I'm in the office, I can stop what I'm doing for a second, turn around, and we can do our meeting. How do you, is it okay to have a regular show meeting, but then have a process of when we have a shoot, we're going to bump it forward or bump it back one day? It's like, is that okay? Like that's what we've been trying to do, is just bump it. So it's not, because I even told him that when we scheduled the day that we scheduled it, I said, when we did it, so we had our whole team there, I said, the only issue is that we schedule work Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. That's our busiest 3 days because it's in the middle of the week. I said, so we're going to have a way to move it around.
If you told me that's the exception, I would say, okay, you're managing the exception. If you said that was the rule, like every week we're pushing it one way or the other, then I think I would challenge, is that meeting at the right time, and do you need to move the day?
I think that's kind of, it probably needs to be moved. But
if you always go back to I think as leaders, sometimes if you always question, is this the right rhythm and the right cadence for my business for what we need today? That's probably the best bet versus, well, tell me about your meeting schedule. Well, it's just always been this way. I inherited it from the last guy. This is what we do. Then it's probably broken because the world's always changing and we should be changing with it. So I would say if you start with we had 0 meetings, and now what are the key meetings I need for my own sanity to keep a pulse check on the business? Then what meetings do my leaders need for them to be able to bring that pulse check to me? And you figure out, okay, here's what we need to run the business. This is our meeting cadence. And that's part of your strategy session for many companies. They'll talk through that and say, hey, for example,
we've just adopted that the last couple of years. So we talk about what are the key KPIs that we really need throughout the organization. Like what's standard? We got to have this information in every one of our businesses and locations. And then what are the meetings that absolutely need to happen? And then, everything else is kind of up to them. But we at least know if we do this, this, and this, that everything can kind of, the information can flow up and down. Yeah. Greatly.
I think there's a key element there too, but build their business around you. Sometimes I'll see leaders show up to meetings and they see data for the first time. Right away, I know it's not the most effective use of everybody's time because you're trying to understand it. And that's how our brains work. I'm eating something and something doesn't taste right now. I'm thinking through like, what could have possibly happened versus if I have think of it, you're bored. If you're bored, if you showed up and say, hey, we're on a board meeting, you passed the deck around for the first time. How effective would that board meeting be? Right? Not. But yet internally, we do that with our meetings all the time where somebody gets their presentation or their scorecard update at the very last minute. Now I've got kind of a respect teamwork thing of like, hey, your team needs time to process. So whether it's 24 hours in advance, but back to building that business around you, if you know that, hey, the second Tuesday of every month, we do this, the year becomes so much clearer for everybody. People can start planning their vacations around things and trying to understand things. But if you're a business that's always moving that, you're creating a lot of waste in the business that's unnecessary.
Yeah.
And you can always manage the exceptions.
Yeah.
But lay it out for the year. Here's our business cadence. Every Tuesday, every other Tuesday, the first Tuesday, lay it out for the year.
Well, and as you guys were talking, I was just thinking about for us, like we just implemented a whiteboard. A whiteboard as in like we have our every
cutting edge.
I know we're doing block scheduling. Well, main thing is we're doing block scheduling, and for our projects, for our billables, and for internal projects, for everything. We're just trying to see if that can hold us more accountable. And I'm like, why aren't we getting our weekly meeting bi-week, every other week? Because that it's hard for us to do it weekly because really how it works for us is we'll have like a week of really busy out in the field and then a week in the office. Yeah. So we get it scheduled to where the week that we're in the office, we'll be more likely to have that meeting and not have to move it around a little bit. And so I was just thinking that I think Chloe, if you're listening.
That's a great example, right? You can now see it, right? So I know week one is maybe those are my financials. Those are my payables. Week two, I'm doing this. I'm out in the field. I'm doing my videos. Week three, I'm doing X. Week four, build your business on that cadence and then only schedule those blocks.
Yeah.
So for me personally, like Monday, Tuesday for me is a certain type of business that I cater to. Wednesday, Thursday is another type of business that I cater to. And then Friday is when I do kind of my wrap up LinkedIn social media. And I built that as my pattern. And when people say, hey, I want to meet, I know, okay, you fit this model. You're a Wednesday, Thursday. Yes, there's always going to be exceptions, but that's how I built my business. And I think that applies to really all businesses.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I think we're probably coming up on our time.
Yeah, great.
I can actually look at the TV. Yeah. Now the viewers are going to be like, wonder why they were looking up the whole time. Well, there's a TV behind us with our screen. We're seeing ourselves. So Brent, thanks for coming. And in person, it was nice having an in-person conversation. How can people follow along with you?
As much as my daughter would make fun of me, I am on social media. I've got Instagram, I've got Facebook, I've got LinkedIn. Brent Rasche at focalpointcoaching.com. That's my website.
Spell Rasche.
Rasche, R-A-S-C-H-E, always out there. But yeah, if you just Google me, that's probably the easiest way to find me. Shoot me an email.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Brent. Great conversation.
Thanks, guys. It's a pleasure.
If you're not making strategic plans,
you're not making money. That was good.
There you go. Good one at the end, Casey. No, really good one, guys.
That was awesome. That's what.
And now Chloe gets to do her magic, right?
No, she don't edit these.